Welcome back to Crime Documentary Files. In this episode, we will continue exploring 3 unbelievable true crime cases. Our first case took place in the city of Xingtai, located in the southern part of Hebei Province, China. On the morning of February 25, 2014, at just after 8 a.m., Mr. Gao Mudao, a farmer living in Baixiang County, went to his farmland near the highway to prepare for planting asparagus. But as he walked further, he suddenly discovered someone lying motionless on the ground near a small forest. Mr. Gao couldn't see the person's face clearly because their head was wrapped in a bedsheet and their mouth was stuffed with a piece of silk cloth. Terrified, Mr. Gao ran back home and called the police. About 20 minutes later, the criminal investigation team from Baixiang County arrived at the scene. After the initial examination, the police discovered the victim was a woman, estimated to be between 20 and 30 years old, standing around 5 feet 3 inches tall. The victim's hands were tied behind her back with a floral silk scarf, and her right ankle was bound with a piece of fabric similar to a blanket. After a thorough investigation, forensic experts found no signs of a struggle at the crime scene. However, they did find 2 bruises on the left temple of the victim. There was also a pool of blood on the ground where the victim's head had been resting, and at the back of her head, forensic experts found a blunt force injury. The police's initial theory was that this severe blow likely caused the victim's death. However, police did not find the murder weapon at the scene. What they did find was a black mask near the body. This mask could cover the entire head, leaving only 3 small holes in the front. It appeared to be a full professional mask. Baixiang County police speculated that this mask might have been used by the killer. After committing the crime, the perpetrator likely discarded the mask at the scene. Additionally, the police discovered a cigarette butt and an empty bottle of mineral water at the crime scene. Investigators quickly collected these important pieces of evidence and brought them back to headquarters for analysis. The Baixiang police speculated that if these items were unintentionally left behind by the perpetrator, they could represent a critical flaw in the killer's plan. However, the truth of the case was far more complicated. Based on the crime scene investigation, it appeared that the victim may have been kidnapped and threatened, then brought to this small forest. The perpetrator likely used a blunt object to strike from behind, delivering a fatal blow. Therefore, the spot where the victim fell was likely the original crime scene. But one strange detail stood out. The crime scene, despite being in a small forest, was only about 100 feet from a busy highway. Committing a crime in such a location would be highly risky and likely to be noticed. So why did the killer choose this spot to carry out the murder? During further investigation, Baixiang police discovered 2 distinct footprints leading from the highway into the small forest. These footprints varied in size and led to the location where the body was found. Upon comparison and analysis, the police quickly realized that the smaller footprint matched the size and pattern of the victim's cotton slippers. Therefore, they deduced that the larger footprint must belong to the perpetrator. After a technical analysis of the larger footprint, Baixiang police made a preliminary assessment of the killer's physical characteristics. The suspect was a man wearing size 10.5 men's shoes during the crime. His body type was average but slightly lean, with a height estimated to be between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 11 inches. The suspect was likely between 30 and 50 years old. As for the direction the killer took after the crime, the police found additional evidence. About 16 feet from the first set of footprints, they discovered a second set of the perpetrator's footprints. Thus, the Baixiang police speculated that during the crime, the killer may have abducted the victim from the highway and brought her into the forest. After committing the murder, the suspect likely returned to the highway. However, the direction the killer took on the highway remains unclear to the Baixiang police. Because this section of the highway was undergoing expansion and renovation, there were numerous footprints from construction workers, and the perpetrator's footprints became indistinguishable from the rest. Therefore, Baixiang police decided to first conduct a comprehensive investigation into the identity of the female victim. In the police department's lab, forensic doctors carried out a more detailed autopsy. The results revealed that the victim was wearing a striped wool coat on the outside, and underneath she had on gray pajamas. Although she was wearing black pants on the lower part of her body, strangely, the victim was not wearing any undergarments. After the autopsy, the forensic doctor concluded that the woman had endured a horrific assault before her death. The time of death was estimated to be between 6 to 8 hours prior, meaning it occurred between approximately 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. on the same day the body was discovered. Given the location where the body was found, Baixiang County, Xingtai City. Baixiang is a relatively small city, but it has excellent transportation connections. Highway 107 is the main route linking Beijing, Hong Kong, and Macau, while a railway connecting Beijing and Guangdong also runs parallel to it. Both these transportation routes pass through Baixiang County. Based on this, the Baixiang police speculated that the victim might have been a local resident from a nearby village. As a result, investigators took a photo of the female victim and went to several villages along these routes asking about her identity. However, after a day of searching, the entire investigation team came up empty-handed. No information was found in villages within a 10-mile radius. This was a surprising result, contrary to their initial assumption. The victim may have been brought here from a faraway location, which would significantly increase the complexity of the case. At this point, the forensic doctors had also completed the biological analysis of the mask, cigarette, and water bottle found at the crime scene. The test results showed that no DNA was found on the helmet or the water bottle. As for the cigarette, although a small amount of saliva was detected, the DNA comparison with the national database did not reveal any suspects. Additionally, DNA from male semen was found in the victim's body, but the results also did not match anyone in the database. This further deepened the mystery of the case. Based on the autopsy, the police discovered that the victim had a trendy reddish-brown dyed hairstyle. She was also wearing 2 earrings of different colors, one copper-colored in her left ear and a white one in her right ear. After further examination, the forensic doctor found that neither of the earrings was made of valuable material. They were just inexpensive fashion jewelry. Additionally, they noted that the victim's nails were painted in a stylish manner. Compiling this information with the victim's overall appearance, it became clear that, despite her fashionable makeup, her clothing was mostly of mid to low range consumer quality. Notably, the wool coat she was wearing appeared to be the kind typically favored by middle-aged women. For such a young and attractive woman, this coat seemed out of place. This detail puzzled investigators slightly. However, based on her clothing, the Baixiang police speculated 2 possible scenarios. The first possibility, considering the time of the crime, suggests that the victim may have been asleep somewhere when a familiar person suddenly barged in and assaulted her. In a state of panic, the attacker may have hastily dressed her in random clothing. She was then kidnapped and taken near the highway, where she was killed. The second possibility is that the victim might have been working at an entertainment venue in the city on the night of the crime. She could have encountered an extremely deranged customer, was brutally tortured, and in a panic, hastily dressed herself afterward. Then she was kidnapped and taken near the highway, where she was murdered by the disturbed individual. Based on the second theory, the investigation team sent officers back to Baixiang County to investigate the local entertainment venues. However, despite several rounds of inquiries, the victim's identity remained a mystery. Was the victim even a local resident of Baixiang County? With no progress in identifying the victim, Baixiang police were forced to temporarily abandon this line of inquiry. Based on prior investigations, if neither the perpetrator nor the victim was from the surrounding villages, further investigation would be required to solve the case. There was one final possibility left. They could have been from another region, driving on the highway when they reached the location where the crime occurred. The perpetrator may have stopped the vehicle, forced the victim into a small wooded area by the side of the highway, and after committing the crime, drove away from the scene along the highway. If this theory is correct, the perpetrator likely traveled along the north-south highway, specifically on the China-Hong Kong-Macau Expressway. Therefore, if the police can locate the vehicle the perpetrator was driving, they may be able to identify the killer. Based on this line of investigation, the police team immediately began analyzing the suspect's route on the highway. First, to the north of the crime scene is Zhengding International Airport in Shijiazhuang. If the suspect traveled on the China-Hong Kong-Macau Expressway, their vehicle would have likely passed through a toll station near the airport. Thus, the police collected all the surveillance footage from that toll station. To the south of the crime scene, they identified another toll station near downtown Qingtai. Using the same method, the investigators collected all surveillance footage from that toll station as well. Based on the victim's time of death, Baixiang police determined that the perpetrator's vehicle passed through the toll stations sometime between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. on the day of the crime. During this time frame, every vehicle passing through both toll stations had to be meticulously checked. After reviewing the initial surveillance footage, Baixiang police identified a total of 171 cars and trucks within the scope of investigation. However, tracking these vehicles proved quite complex. In addition to local vehicles from Hebei province, there were also cars from Beijing, Inner Mongolia, Shanxi, Qinghai, and over 10 other provinces and cities. This greatly expanded the scope of the investigation. As a result, the investigation team divided forces to conduct follow-up inquiries at the locations of these vehicles. Another group of police officers began to conduct a more detailed investigation into the travel times of the 171 vehicles. It didn't take long for them to find a suspicious vehicle, a silver-gray pickup truck. According to surveillance footage from the northern toll station, this vehicle passed through at around 5:15 a.m. on the day of the crime. Under normal driving conditions, the pickup truck should have reached the southern toll station in about an hour and a half. However, according to the surveillance footage from the southern toll station, the pickup truck passed through at 7:45 a.m., meaning it took over 2.5 hours to cover the distance where the crime occurred. This raised suspicions among the investigators. Upon investigating the vehicle's owner, the police found that the driver of the pickup truck was Ye Jiming, a resident of Hebei province. Faced with the sudden appearance of the police, Ye Jiming appeared quite confused. Investigators asked him, "Did you experience anything unusual on the highway on February 25, 2014? Ye Jiming responded, "I was exhausted after playing cards with friends the day before, so I took a break for over an hour at a service station along the way." He even provided a witness who was with him to corroborate his story. At that point, the police eliminated him as a suspect. Shortly after, the police discovered another suspicious vehicle. It was a black Toyota with Jiangsu province license plates. According to surveillance footage, this car had entered the Beijing-Hong Kong-Macau Expressway from Luancheng town in Shijiazhuang and headed toward its destination. The final destination was Longyao County, south of Qingtai City. Under normal driving conditions, the driver should have reached his destination in about an hour. However, on the night of the crime, this vehicle spent over 3 hours on the highway. The police quickly identified the owner of the car as Feng Shijie. According to the vehicle's registration, Feng Shijie, 42 years old, was a local resident of Longyao County. His physical characteristics also closely matched the police's description of the suspect. When investigators reached Longyao County Police Headquarters, they contacted Feng Shijie by phone. His reaction was highly suspicious. Initially, he claimed he had an urgent family matter and couldn't come to the station to provide a statement. After several reminders from the investigators, he finally agreed to come to the station at 4 p.m. that same day. At the scheduled time, Feng Shijie did not show up, and his phone could no longer be reached. This unusual behavior increased the police's suspicion. At this point, Baixiang County Police received another crucial lead. The investigation team found that Feng Shijie's vehicle had previously been involved in a traffic violation, and at that time, a young woman named Xu Honglan, 21 years old from Shanxi province, had paid the fine on his behalf. When police looked at a photo of Xu Honglan, they noticed that her face bore some resemblance to the female victim. After considering changes in appearance with and without makeup, the police began to suspect that Xu Honglan might be the victim in this case. Based on records related to the traffic violation, Baixiang police obtained Xu Honglan's phone number. However, her mobile phone was turned off. Not long after, the police located Xu Honglan's address in Shijiazhuang. Two investigators traveled to Shijiazhuang to investigate the young woman. The investigation revealed that Xu Honglan had worked at several entertainment venues in Shijiazhuang, but she had recently gone missing. This discovery excited the police, as it seemed the case of the unidentified woman might soon be solved. However, no one expected that the real killer was still hiding elsewhere. In an effort to confirm the identity of the female victim as quickly as possible, Baixiang police decided to send an investigator to Xu Honglan's hometown in Shanxi province. Upon arriving in Yangshuo County, Henan City, Shanxi province, the police were surprised to learn from Xu Honglan's father that his daughter had not gone missing. He explained that Xu Honglan had simply changed jobs and updated her mobile phone number. Following these new leads, Baixiang police eventually located Xu Honglan in Shijiazhuang. When they asked her if she knew the woman in the photo of the victim, the result was another disappointment for the police. Xu Honglan stated that she did not know the victim, and that at the time of the crime, she had been in Shijiazhuang and had not left the city. Shortly after, investigators located the owner of the suspect vehicle. According to Feng Shijie's statement, he did not come to the police station as scheduled because he had an urgent family matter to handle, and his phone had run out of battery, causing it to turn off. Investigators continued questioning Feng Shijie, asking why his vehicle was on the highway for over 3 hours on the night of February 25th. Feng Shijie smoothly replied, "My car broke down, and it took me more than an hour to fix it." He then called someone who had been with him to serve as a witness. Once again, the police were left disappointed and had to leave without further leads. Baixiang police were forced to continue investigating the remaining vehicles on the list. When they reached vehicle number 68, it caught their attention. It was a yellow car from Chang'an, a Chinese automaker. Based on surveillance footage, this vehicle entered the highway from Shijiazhuang at around 3 a.m. on February 25th, heading south and passing through Baixiang County. By 6:15 a.m. that same morning, the vehicle returned to Shijiazhuang. This means the car made a round trip on the highway during the exact time frame the crime occurred. Unfortunately, due to the heavy fog that night, the highway toll station cameras did not capture a clear image of the driver. However, using the car's license plate, Baixiang police quickly identified the vehicle's owner. According to the registration, the owner was Li Jianhua, a 60-year-old woman with an address in Shijiazhuang, Hebei province. Investigators then visited Li Jianhua's registered home address. To their surprise, they found that Li Jianhua no longer lived there. According to a neighbor, Li Jianhua had sold the house 2 years ago and moved away, but no one knew where she had relocated. Investigators then showed the neighbors a photo of the female victim, hoping to gather clues about her identity. Surprisingly, the neighbors all confirmed that Li Jianhua had a daughter, but the daughter rarely came home as she stayed at her school most of the time. However, they could not confirm whether the victim in the photo was Li Jianhua's daughter. At this point, the police had a vague but suspicious lead regarding the victim's identity, but they still had no way of locating Li Jianhua or her daughter. The police then issued a public notice on Hebei province's television station, hoping to gather helpful leads from the public. Fortunately, 3 days after the notice was broadcast, a man named Li Jianwei, a 56-year-old from Shijiazhuang, called the Baixiang County Police. He told them over the phone that the photo of the female victim in the notice looked like his sister's daughter, his niece. Li Jianwei later went to the Baixiang County Police Station to confirm the body. He eventually identified the murdered victim as his niece, Zhang Xiaoding. Based on Li Jianwei's testimony, his sister, Li Jianhua, was the owner of the yellow car. 2 years earlier, when Zhang Xiaoding graduated from high school, she started working. As a result, Li Jianhua decided to move back to her hometown with her husband, Jia Yanlong, to start a new life in another county. Li Jianhui also added that his niece had just turned 19 and was working at a clothing store, while his sister worked at an insurance company. Her husband, Jia Yanlong, drove a taxi during the day and would cook dinner at home, waiting for his wife and daughter to return from work. Although Zhang Xiaoding was adopted, the three of them had a close and loving relationship over the years, overcoming many difficulties together. Initially, life for Li Jianhua's family was improving. However, just 9 days prior, Li Jianhui suddenly realized that he couldn't reach his sister by phone. He initially thought his sister had either forgotten to charge her phone or hadn't brought it with her. The next day, Li Jianhui called Li Jianhua again, but still, he couldn't get through. Concerned, he contacted his brother-in-law, Jia Yanlong. Jia Yanlong explained that on the afternoon of February 24th, Zhang Xiaoding's boyfriend came to their home to meet the family. Afterward, he, Li Jianhua, and Zhang Xiaoding went out together and had not returned home since. Jia Yanlong was very worried. Starting from February 25th, he had tried to contact both Li Jianhua and Zhang Xiaoding, but their cell phones were turned off the entire time. On Li Jianhui's side, he was also very worried and called his brother-in-law asking if they should report the case to the police. At that point, Jia Yanlong replied, "There's no need to report to the police." He explained that he had received a message from his wife. Jia Yanlong then forwarded the message to Li Jianhui. In front of the Baixiang County Police, Li Jianhui showed everyone the message his brother-in-law had sent him. The message read, "Jianhui, your sister and niece are fine. We are safe in a distant place. Don't worry. Stay with your brother-in-law for a few years. I'm not at peace with the current situation, and I can't accept normalcy. So, let's meet again in 4 years. During that time, don't contact us. Just treat it like we've disappeared, and don't search for us. I will give Jia Yanlong 50,000 yuan to help him get through this year. Please help me give it to him. We'll talk in more detail when we meet in 4 years. Whether you help or not, it's entirely up to you." After reading this message, investigators quickly noticed some suspicious elements. First, the motive behind Li Jianhua sending this message seemed odd. After losing contact with Li Jianhua and Zhang Xiaoding, Li Jianhui had never been able to reach them, so Li Jianhua likely didn't know her brother was searching for them. Second, if Li Jianhua had decided to send this message to her brother, she could have simply used her own phone to message him directly. Why complicate things by going through Jia Yanlong? The third point was based on Li Jianhui's recollection. His sister Li Jianhua had previously told him that she was against her daughter Zhang Xiaoding living with her current boyfriend. So why had she suddenly changed her mind and gone off with the two of them? Given these suspicious details, Baixiang County Police proposed a theory. This strange message might have been written by Jia Yanlong himself. But why would he do such a thing? Perhaps only by finding Jia Yanlong or Li Jianhua could they uncover the full truth of the case. Based on the leads provided by Li Jianhui, Baixiang police went to the family's home to investigate. This was Li Jianhua's house, but the front door was tightly locked. After a preliminary check, investigators confirmed that no one had been living there for several days. They then proceeded to Jia Yanlong's hometown to gather more information. In another village, police found Jia Yanlong's father. Based on his testimony, police learned that Jia Yanlong had returned to his hometown a week earlier. When his father asked why his wife and niece hadn't come with him, to his father's surprise, Jia Yanlong said, "Li Jianhua and her daughter have gone missing. I have no idea where they went." This statement was clearly the opposite of what Jia Yanlong had told Li Jianhui. Based on this, Baixiang County Police concluded that Jia Yanlong was the prime suspect. Investigators contacted Li Jianhui and used his phone to reach out to Jia Yanlong, knowing that Jia would likely meet with Li for the 50,000 yuan. On the morning of March 8, 2014, Baixiang County Police arrived at the location where Li Jianhui and Jia Yanlong had arranged to meet. At around 11 a.m., the suspect arrived at the meeting point in the yellow car. Within 3 minutes, the police quickly arrested Jia Yanlong. On the way back to the Baixiang County Police Station, Jia Yanlong confessed to his crimes. At first, he told the police that he had killed his daughter, Zhang Xiaoding, and dumped her body in the forest near the highway. After a few seconds of silence, Jia Yanlong continued and admitted, "I also killed my wife, Li Jianhua." This confession left the police in complete shock. When Li Jianwei heard the news, he too was in disbelief, unable to understand how his brother-in-law could be so cruel. The story began in 1994, almost 30 years earlier. At that time, Jia Yanlong was 20 years old, married, and had a child in his hometown of Yuanshi County. Though the family was poor, they managed to get by through farming. Unfortunately, while his wife was pregnant, Jia Yanlong gave in to his youthful desires and sexually assaulted a young woman. He was convicted of rape and sentenced to prison. His wife filed for divorce, leaving behind their newborn twins and moving away from Yuanshi County. With their son in prison, Jia Yanlong's parents were left to care for the twins. They hoped their son would reintegrate into society after his release. However, when Jia Yanlong was released in 1998 after serving 4 years, he didn't return to his hometown. Instead, he moved to Zhengding, about 30 miles away, to start a new life. Jia Yanlong learned how to cook and began working as a chef at a restaurant in Zhengding. Not long after, Jia Yanlong met Li Jianhua at the restaurant. Although Li Jianhua was 42 years old at the time, she looked much younger because she took great care of herself and applied makeup daily. Jia Yanlong, who was 25, began to pursue her enthusiastically. Despite the 17-year age difference and the fact that Li Jianhua had been through a failed marriage and had an adopted daughter named Zhang Xiaoding, Jia Yanlong wasn't bothered by any of that. In fact, Li Jianhua felt a bit embarrassed by this, especially in front of family and friends. She was always worried about people gossiping and judging her younger boyfriend. Soon after, the two began living together, though they hadn't officially married. The early days were sweet. At that time, Zhang Xiaoding was only 3 years old, so managing the household was relatively easy for Jia Yanlong. However, as time went on, Jia Yanlong started to feel that Li Jianhua had a very strong personality, which could have been due to the age gap. Li Jianhua made most of the decisions in the household, even about the smallest things. During the day, Jia Yanlong continued working as a chef at the restaurant, but when he came home in the evenings, he had to do all the chores, washing clothes, cooking, and taking care of the child. He was responsible for everything. Occasionally, if he was a bit slow, Li Jianhua would scold him. Jia Yanlong once confided, "Having gone through prison and being abandoned by my ex-wife, I longed for a family. So, I always tried to be patient and give in to Li Jianhua." He never considered returning to his hometown in Yuanshi County. That is, until one day, 10 years later, when a neighbor from his hometown happened to run into Jia Yanlong in Zhengding. After that, his elderly father was finally able to reconnect with him after years of no contact. His father said to him, "Why have you been so heartless? It's been years. Why haven't you come home to visit your parents and your children?" Jia Yanlong replied, "I don't have the money. Why should I go back? To let people mock me?" For Jia Yanlong, his pride seemed more important than caring for his parents and raising his children. For this reason, after a brief, superficial visit to his parents and kids, Jia Yanlong returned to Zhengding to live with Li Jianhua and her daughter. Upon returning to Zhengding, Jia Yanlong quit his job at the restaurant and stopped working as a chef. With the help of Li Jianwei, Li Jianhua purchased a new Chang'an car and handed it over to Jia Yanlong so he could make money by driving an unlicensed taxi in the city. Although the family's financial situation improved, Jia Yanlong's resentment toward Li Jianhua continued to grow. By June 2012, Jia Yanlong convinced Li Jianhua to sell their old house in Zhengding. The plan was for the three of them to move back to Jia Yanlong's hometown in Yuanshi and buy a new house. This seemed like a step forward for the family. However, problems arose shortly after, in September 2012. Jia Yanlong's biological daughter wanted to get married, and as her father, he hoped to use some of the family's savings to help pay for her wedding. But Li Jianhua, who controlled the family's finances, was stingy and only gave him 1,680 yuan. This made Jia Yanlong feel humiliated in front of the entire village. As a father, he felt incapable of supporting his daughter and parents. This incident caused Jia Yanlong to harbor resentment toward Li Jianhua. Just 6 months later, another event caused his pent-up frustration to explode. In March 2013, Jia Yanlong's elderly mother accidentally fell and broke her hip. He wanted to withdraw 20,000 yuan to pay for her medical bills, but Li Jianhua refused. Despite his repeated pleas, she only agreed to give him 5,000 yuan. This left Jia Yanlong feeling utterly powerless. Things didn't stop there. The next issue involved Li Jianhua's adopted daughter, Zhang Xiaoding. After graduating from high school at the age of 18, Zhang Xiaoding began working, selling clothes at a shopping mall. Not long after, she started dating someone. At first, it seemed like a normal, even joyful event. But when she introduced her boyfriend to her family, both Jia Yanlong and Li Jianhua were shocked. Zhang Xiaoding's boyfriend was actually a married man, and he looked older than his actual age. Li Jianhua could not accept this. Jia Yanlong said, "Every day when I came home from work, I'd almost always find Li Jianhua and her daughter arguing." At this point, Jia Yanlong wanted to talk with Zhang Xiaoding, but as usual, she responded with foul language and disrespect in front of him. Feeling helpless, he turned to Li Jianhua, trying to convince her to accept the situation. However, Li Jianhua was still upset, feeling that the daughter she had raised was going to marry a man like that. Li Jianhua forced her daughter to break off the relationship immediately and continued berating Jia Yanlong. In her tirade of insults, she even disrespected Jia Yanlong's ancestors, which is considered extremely offensive in Chinese culture. However, as was his habit, Jia Yanlong had no choice but to endure the verbal abuse. He left the house and went out to drink, trying to ease his frustration. In his mind, Jia Yanlong began to feel hopeless about this family. He thought about escaping but had no idea where he could go. On the evening of February 24th, 2014, after a long day of driving his unlicensed taxi, Jia Yanlong planned to eat dinner and go straight to bed. But as soon as he walked into the house, he was greeted by the sound of constant arguing between his wife and adopted daughter. At first, Jia Yanlong said nothing, silently sitting in a chair in the corner of the living room. However, as the argument between Li Jianhua and Zhang Xiaoding escalated, the topic shifted to include Jia Yanlong. He wanted to respond, but neither Li Jianhua nor her daughter gave him the chance. Both of them took turns hurling insults at him, using foul language. Jia Yanlong recalled that Li Jianhua made no logical points. From start to finish, she focused on trivial matters, and in the end, both Li Jianhua and Zhang Xiaoding concluded that everything wrong in their lives was Jia Yanlong's fault. They blamed him for his lack of determination, for not earning enough money, and for his inadequate parenting. Faced with these accusations, Jia Yanlong stormed out of the house, his mind filled with anger. He went to a nearby restaurant to drink away his sorrows. It wasn't until late that night that he finally returned home, but his mood had not improved. By then, Li Jianhua and Zhang Xiaoding had gone to bed. In contrast, Jia Yanlong couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the living room, and memories from the past 16 years began flooding his mind. He realized that nothing in his life had gone the way he wanted. Jia Yanlong said, "The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. The more I thought, the more confused I felt. In the end, I came to a conclusion. As a man, I had lived too weakly for all these years. My love for Li Jianhua had long disappeared." With his mind filled with resentment, Jia Yanlong was driven to commit his crime. Under the influence of alcohol, Jia Yanlong grabbed an iron hammer. He quietly entered the bedroom and struck Li Jianhua, who was fast asleep, on the head. Her skull was shattered, and she would never wake up again. Jia Yanlong then placed her body in the car and drove to a road about 1.2 miles away. There, he used the hammer to open a manhole cover and dragged his wife's body, dumping it into the sewer. After returning home, Jia Yanlong set his sights on Zhang Xiaoding. In his heart, He believed that his adopted daughter was the real cause of his family's misfortune. He returned to the bedroom, put on a black mask, and entered Zhang Xiaoding's room. At that point, she resisted fiercely, but Jia Yanlong punched her twice in the temple. After she passed out, he suddenly had the urge to assault her. After committing the assault, Jia Yanlong dressed Zhang Xiaoding in pajamas and cotton pants, then randomly threw on one of Li Jianhua's fur coats. He tore some fabric from a blanket to tie her hands and feet and stuffed a piece of cloth into her mouth. He wrapped her head in a blanket. At around 3 a.m., Jia Yanlong placed Zhang Xiaoding in the car and drove on to the Beijing-Hong Kong-Macau Expressway. He drove south for a while. During the drive, Zhang Xiaoding briefly regained consciousness but was too weak to resist. Jia Yanlong said that by the time he reached Baisiang County, he realized that dawn was approaching. So he found an emergency stop area, took Zhang Xiaoding away from the highway, and in a small nearby forest, ended her life with the same hammer. After finishing the act, Jia Yanlong hurriedly removed the mask and discarded it at the crime scene. He then returned to the highway and drove south before eventually turning back toward Yuanshu County. When Li Jianwei contacted Jia Yanlong to ask about the whereabouts of his sister, Li Jianhua, Jia Yanlong lied, saying that Li Jianhua and her daughter had gone out with Zhang Xiaoding's boyfriend and had not returned. In an attempt to cover up the truth, Jia Yanlong deliberately wrote a fake message. On one hand, he wanted to stop Li Jianwei and the police from continuing their investigation, and on the other, he hoped to get some money from Li Jianwei. However, he didn't realize that the very message he wrote would be the clue that exposed him to the police. Based on Jia Yanlong's confession, the police quickly found Li Jianhua's body in the drainage sewer. The scene was horrifying and heartbreaking. Li Jianhua was still wearing her sleepwear, and her head had multiple injuries caused by the weapon. At this point, everything was clear. The police promptly finalized the case to bring Jia Yanlong's crimes to justice. On April 5, 2014, the Hebei Provincial Intermediate People's Court sentenced Jia Yanlong to death for premeditated murder. This verdict provided some comfort and closure to the victims' families and the public. However, for Jia Yanlong's parents, it was a devastating blow. Despite the fact that Jia Yanlong had abandoned them and his two biological children for more than 10 years, he had still been their only support. It was a tragic end for a family that had once seemed like it could have been happy and whole. Next case we'll explore is a truly unique one that took place on the island of Taiwan. Can you imagine a frail woman who couldn't even walk properly becoming an extremely dangerous murderer? In fact, she was given the infamous title of Taiwan's Black Widow. So, how did she commit the crime despite being paralyzed? What was the weapon used by this beautiful woman? On October 13, 1995, the Linchang Police Department in Taipei City, Taiwan, received a report. A passerby had discovered a charred body near a garbage dump, deep within the Jianan Mountain forest. The police quickly arrived at the scene and found the victim, a man whose entire body had been doused in acid. The lower half of his body was almost completely corroded. Upon witnessing the scene, the police assessed that this was an incredibly serious case involving a particularly brutal killer. After an autopsy, renowned forensic pathologist Yang Risong discovered that the victim had a strangulation mark around his neck, and his esophagus and stomach contained alcohol and sleeping pills. The estimated time of death was between midnight and 1 a.m. At this point, the police initially determined that the victim had consumed beer mixed with sleeping pills and was then strangled to death. Afterward, sulfuric acid was poured down his windpipe. When it came to gathering evidence at the scene, the police faced many difficulties. Although the body was severely burned, the forensic team was able to carefully collect fingerprints that hadn't been completely eroded by the acid. After many efforts, the police were able to identify the victim as 22-year-old Xu Jizhong. He had just completed his military service in April of that year and was working as a salesman for a car company. Through interviews and investigation, the police gathered a key lead from the victim's parents and his boss, Mr. Huang. They mentioned that Xu Jizhong was a simple, Well-behaved man who never gave his family any reason to worry. The only thing that concerned his parents was his involvement with a woman named Fan Mingqiu. Additionally, the police obtained a critical clue. On the evening of the 12th, while Xu Zhang was working a night shift with his boss, he suddenly said that there were 3 customers interested in buying cars and left the company immediately. Around 9 p.m. that night, Xu and Mr. Huang spoke on the phone, with Xu mentioning that he, his girlfriend, and the 3 customers were singing karaoke at a local lounge. After that, there was no further contact from him. The police then began investigating Fan Mingqiu. At the time, she was running a passenger transportation business at a stall in a forest area of Taipei City. When questioned, Fan Mingqiu stated, "I did go to the karaoke lounge, but I went home before 9 p.m. Xu Zhang was just a casual friend, and we weren't particularly close." She also added that after Xu Zhang went to serve in the military, they hardly kept in touch and that there was no romantic relationship between them. However, this testimony clearly contradicted the statements given by the victim's parents and his boss, Mr. Huang. So, was there a misunderstanding, or was Fan Mingqiu lying? The theory that she was lying seemed more plausible because if they were just casual acquaintances, Xu Zhang had no reason to invite her to join his customers. Likewise, Fan Mingqiu wouldn't have agreed to go if they were just casual friends. At this point, the police spoke with the building manager where Fan Mingqiu lived and learned that she had returned home around 2 or 3 a.m. on the morning of the 13th. Shortly after, Xu Zhang's motorcycle was found near a karaoke lounge at the intersection of Changchun Road and Xinsheng Road in Taipei. Surveillance footage showed that at 8:20 p.m. on the evening of November 12th, Xu Zhang entered the karaoke lounge with 2 men and 2 women, including Fan Mingqiu. By 12:16 a.m. the next morning, 2 men were seen carrying a heavily intoxicated Xu Zhang outside, with Fan Mingqiu following closely behind. It was clear that her earlier statements were completely false. However, this case now appeared to involve more people. So, who were the 2 men who escorted Xu Zhang, and where did they go after leaving the karaoke lounge? To ensure they gathered accurate evidence, the police decided to secretly monitor the suspects. The following day, they uncovered 2 suspicious phone calls. It was Fan Mingqiu, who had called the 2 men to take Xu Zhang away that night. In one part of the conversation, Fan Mingqiu said, "I have an urgent matter. Wait for me at home, and if the police come, don't say anything." Not long after, the police arrested everyone who had been present that night and began interrogating each person individually. Surprisingly, within just a few hours, the case began to unravel. It turned out that 7 people in total had entered the karaoke lounge that evening, including 3 friends of Fan Mingqiu, Lu Zhenghong, Zhou Junji, and Xu Sufen. The 2 other men were Fan Mingqiu's brother, Fan Minghong, and her boyfriend, Fang Haining. At the time, Xu Zhang believed he was going to the karaoke lounge to discuss the details of a car sale, but he had no idea he was walking into a trap set by Fan Mingqiu. During the interrogation, Fan Mingqiu confessed, saying, "I hated him, and I don't regret killing him." Naturally, the police were curious. What had the victim done to make her harbor such hatred? Let's go back to 3 years earlier when the 2 first met. At that time, Xu Zhang would often visit Fan Mingqiu's stall to have seals engraved, and over time the 2 got to know each other, leading to more interactions like dining out, watching movies, and traveling together. Due to Fan Mingqiu's limited mobility, Xu Zhang would often assist her, including carrying her in and out of vehicles when necessary. However, Fan Mingqiu claimed that Xu Zhang wasn't as innocent as his parents portrayed him. According to her, he was abusive. The 2 frequently argued during their relationship, and even Xu Zhang's parents disapproved of them being together, possibly due to Fan Mingqiu's inability to walk normally. During the time Xu Zhang was completing his military service, Fan Mingqiu began a relationship with Fang Haining, a married man. She then decided to break up with Xu Zhang, but he refused. Not only did he threaten to kill Fan Mingqiu's entire family, but he also frequently used his crutches to intimidate and physically abuse her. At this point, Fan Mingqiu's brother, Fan Minghong, became frustrated with Xu Zhang's behavior. On one occasion, when the three of them went on a trip together, Fan Minghong and Xu Zhizhong got into an argument, which led to Fan Minghong attacking Xu Zhizhong and hitting him on the head. It's worth noting that Fan Minghong was already serving a suspended sentence for a robbery conviction at the time. If Xu Zhizhong decided to press charges, Fan Minghong would likely end up back in prison. Xu used this as leverage, threatening Fan Mingxiu that if she broke up with him, her brother would be sent to jail. With no other options, she felt forced to comply for the time being. However, Xu Zhizhong later retracted his words and insisted on filing charges. This led Fan Mingxiu to hatch a plan with her brother and lover to deal with Xu Zhizhong. According to Fan Mingxiu's testimony, her three friends had no knowledge of the murder plot. They were invited under the guise of being potential car buyers because Xu Zhizhong was physically strong and had undergone special forces training during his military service. They realized they couldn't overpower him while he was alert, so the best option was to act when he was unconscious. At this point, Fan Mingxiu set her plan in motion. She complained to her three friends, saying, "Xu Zhizhong has been harassing me, and I hope you can help me stage a plan to get him drunk, take some compromising photos, and use them to threaten him to stop bothering me." Her friends readily agreed, thinking they were just helping her out. The first attempt took place on November 6th, with Fan Mingxiu orchestrating the plan. They all met at a beer bar on Changchun Road, but despite how much they drank, Xu Zhizhong didn't get drunk. With that plan failing, Fan Mingxiu moved to Plan B. She instructed Xu Sufen to crush 12 sleeping pills into a powder and prepare to mix them into the liquor that Fan Mingxiu would bring. This second attempt unfolded on the night of October 12th. Lu Zhenghong and the others pretended to visit the car dealership to view vehicles, then invited Xu Zhizhong to the karaoke lounge to drink under the pretense of discussing the car purchase details. Naturally, Xu Zhizhong couldn't pass up the chance to make a good sale, so he unsuspectingly invited Fan Mingxiu to join him. This time, after a few drinks, Xu Zhizhong quickly fell asleep. Fan Minghong and Fang Haining, who were waiting at the karaoke lounge, took Xu Zhizhong away. Fan Mingxiu's three friends thought they had done something helpful for their friend, unaware they had become accomplices in a murder. Meanwhile, Fan Minghong and Fang Haining drove Xu Zhizhong to the remote Jianhua mountain area, particularly desolate in the middle of the night. Fan Minghong and Fang Haining dragged Xu Zhizhong out of the car, stripped him of his clothes, and placed him on an aluminum ladder they had brought with them. They then used a towel to strangle him to death. But they didn't stop there. Fang Haining pulled out a bottle of concentrated acid and poured it over the body. Finally, they lifted the aluminum ladder and threw it into a ravine. The entire time, Fan Mingxiu silently watched. After hearing the details, "Did you notice something?" Fang Haining seemed filled with resentment, as if he and the victim had a terrible history of conflict. And indeed, it turned out that the two were not just rivals in love, but had deep-seated animosity. Let's go back 4 months before Xu Zhizhong was murdered. There had been 2 acid attacks in the forests of Taipei. The victim in both cases was Fang Haining's wife. The first incident occurred on July 4th. As Fang Haining, his wife, and their daughter left their home, they were attacked with acid. Fortunately, the assailant missed, and the acid only grazed his wife's shoulder. Thanks to timely medical attention, she sustained only minor injuries. Just over a month later, on August 16th, a strange phone call was made to Fang Haining's house. A man informed them that he had a delivery that required a signature. When Fang Haining's wife opened the door, a bottle of concentrated acid was thrown at her. She couldn't dodge in time, and the acid severely burned her face. After spending more than a month in the hospital, her appearance was permanently disfigured, and nearly all her hair had been burned off. If not treated properly, there was a risk she could have been blinded. Facing such a tragedy, Fang Haining was filled with hatred for the person responsible. He called the police to investigate, but they couldn't identify the perpetrator. It wasn't until later that Fan Mingxiu told him that the person who attacked his family might have been a man nicknamed Mad Dog, referring to Xu Zhizhong. At that stage, no one could confirm whether Xu Zhizhong was the one who committed the acid attacks, but he certainly had a motive. It's possible that Xu Zhizhong was unhappy about Fan Mingxiu's relationship with Fang Haining and took out his frustrations on his romantic rival's family. Or perhaps Fan Mingxiu didn't know who the real culprit was, but blamed Xu Zhizhong to fuel Fang Haining's hatred toward him. Regardless of the truth, Fan Mingxiu had achieved her goal. Fang Haining was now determined to join her in exacting revenge on Xu Zhizhong. This might explain why Fang Haining poured acid on the corpse. But is everything as Fan Mingxiu claimed? If Xu Zhizhong wanted revenge, the appropriate target would have been Fang Haining, the man who stole his girlfriend. Why would Xu Zhizhong attack his rival's wife instead? After all, she was just a victim in this situation. At this point, the police weren't fully convinced by the story, and they put forth a bold hypothesis. The mastermind behind the acid attacks on Fang Haining's family was likely Fan Mingxiu, with Xu Zhizhong merely being an accomplice in carrying out the cruel plan. This theory stemmed from an event in May 1995 when Fan Mingxiu had suggested to Fang Haining that if they wanted to stay together, he needed to divorce his wife. However, Fang Haining didn't want to abandon his family and decided to end the relationship with her instead. Fan Mingxiu, filled with rage, then enlisted Xu Zhizhong to throw acid on Fang Haining's wife. This plan essentially killed two birds with one stone. First, she would get her revenge on Fang Haining for breaking up with her, and second, she succeeded in creating a rift between the two men. At this point, the case had become incredibly complex, with Fan Mingxiu orchestrating the entire scheme. Even the most experienced detectives were astounded by how such a seemingly gentle and physically disabled woman could mastermind such a ruthless plot. Returning to the case, the police still didn't fully understand. Why did Xu Zhizhong follow Fan Mingxiu's instructions? What benefit did he gain from it? In reality, Xu Zhizhong's actions only harmed him. But perhaps he was blinded by love, willing to sacrifice everything for Fan Mingxiu, even committing terrible acts. Surprisingly, this wasn't the first time such a situation had occurred. After the media reported on Xu Zhizhong's case, an elderly couple came to the police station hoping they could help find their missing son. Their missing son was named Zhou Jian, and the police discovered that he was Fan Mingxiu's ex-husband. Coincidentally, Zhou Jian shared a similar condition. He also suffered from partial paralysis and had a slight disability in his leg. In 1986, they both attended a stamp carving course at a vocational school for disabled individuals. It was there that they fell in love, and 2 years later, Zhou Jian and Fan Mingxiu got married and had a daughter named Zhou Mengjun. After getting married, each of them opened their own business. Fan Mingxiu, with her cheerful personality and excellent communication skills, along with her attractive appearance, drew in many customers, and her business flourished. According to media reports, her monthly income could reach up to 100,000 new Taiwan dollars, equivalent to about 3,200 US dollars, a high income in Taiwan, especially for someone with a disability. In contrast, Zhou Jian's business struggled, and eventually, he had to switch jobs. Surprisingly, this disabled man ended up working as a delivery driver. However, in late 1992, Zhou Jian suddenly disappeared without a trace. Fan Mingxiu reported his disappearance to the authorities, claiming she had no idea where her husband had gone after returning home from work, and that he hadn't left any messages. The police found a leather bag that Zhou Jian usually carried for work at home, and inside it were customer receipts dated December 24, 1992. According to the delivery company's policy, customer-signed receipts must be returned to the company for record keeping. The presence of these receipts in his bag suggested that Zhou Jian had likely disappeared before returning to the company after completing his deliveries. Despite searching for a long time, the police couldn't find any leads at the time. Interestingly, 1 year later, Fan Mingxiu filed for divorce in civil court, citing that Zhou Jian had cruelly abandoned his family. The divorce was granted. She even gave up custody of their daughter, handing her over to Zhou Jian's parents. From then on, she lived alone in the Beidou district of Taipei. Now, Zhou Jian's parents had brought up his disappearance once again, prompting the city to order a renewed investigation, with Fan Mingxiu being named the prime suspect. During questioning, however, Fan Mingxiu completely denied any involvement in her ex-husband's disappearance. What she didn't expect was that this time the police had found a key witness. According to one of Zhou Jian's former colleagues, on the evening of December 24, 1992, he, Zhou Jian, Fan Mingxiu, Fan Minghong, and Xu Jizhong had a party at a beer hall in the city. After they had been drinking, Fan Mingxiu and the others offered to take Zhou Jian home first. After that, Zhou Jian lost contact with him. Fang Haining, who had been arrested earlier, confessed to the police that he had also helped kill Fan Mingxiu's ex-husband, Zhou Jian, and that the body had been buried in their hometown of Kaohsiung. Despite this, both Fan Mingxiu and her brother continued to deny any involvement in Zhou Jian's disappearance. It wasn't until the police set a trap that Fan Minghong carelessly revealed the truth. That night, Fan Minghong, who had been studying in Taichung, came to Taipei to meet his sister. Fan Mingxiu had suspected that her brother and his classmates were getting too close, so she invited Zhou Jian out for drinks. A colleague of Zhou Jian's had also attended the dinner. After 3 rounds of drinking, Xu Jizhong and Fan Minghong dragged a drunk Zhou Jian into a car and strangled him with a rope. They then drove back to their hometown in Kaohsiung and buried the body in the backyard, where it remained for 3 years. So, what was the real motive behind the murder of Fan Mingxiu's ex-husband? Initially, the couple seemed to live a fairly good life after marriage. But as the business gap between their 2 shops widened, Zhou Jian developed bad habits: drinking, gambling, and even smuggling. Worse, he became abusive and often physically assaulted his wife. Fan Mingxiu had once suggested divorce, but Zhou Jian demanded 5 million new Taiwan dollars, around $150,000, refusing to agree to a divorce unless he received the money. Even though Fan Mingxiu's business was doing well, 5 million new Taiwan dollars was a huge amount for her. She could no longer endure the dark life she was living. Fan Mingxiu frequently shared her troubles with her friends, even going as far as saying, "I really want to kill him." In 1992, Xu Jizhong, who was only 19 at the time, couldn't stand to see the woman he loved being tormented like this. He told Fan Mingxiu, "I can take care of that bastard for you." And so, a brutal plan was set into motion. Later, Fan Mingxiu admitted that much of the reason behind killing Xu Jizhong was due to his constant references to the Zhou Jian incident, using it to blackmail her. When the case was made public, both the media and the public were shocked by the complex relationships between the people involved and the unbelievable motives driving this woman to commit such crimes. However, the public seemed more captivated by Fan Mingxiu's allure than by following the details of the trial. This frail woman, who had difficulty moving, possessed an extraordinary charm. Fan Mingxiu had many men surrounding her, and they were willing to let her manipulate them psychologically. A nearby shopkeeper even stated, "Many young men would come and talk to Fan Mingxiu, and everyone seemed to like her." While Xu Jizhong was serving in the military, he reportedly sent her a letter every single day. The media also reported that during her imprisonment, some individuals sent her flowers and chocolates. One of the prosecutors involved in the case even posted a lengthy signed statement on social media, saying that after meeting Fan Mingxiu, he finally understood what the magic of enchanting eyes meant. Although that statement might be an exaggeration, her charm was undeniable. With the face of an angel but a heart of a snake, Fan Mingxiu was described this way in numerous media outlets. In these 3 murder cases, while Fan Mingxiu didn't physically commit the murders, she was undeniably the mastermind behind them. All the men in her life ended up dead or imprisoned because of her schemes. Aside from Zhou Jian, Xu Jizhong, and Fang Haining, there was another former boyfriend who was falsely accused of rape by Fan Mingxiu, ultimately landing him in jail in shame. It was because of the tragic fate of these men that Fan Mingxiu earned the title of Taiwan's Black Widow. Some media outlets speculated that her personality was shaped by her upbringing. Fan Mingxiu's parents divorced when she was young, and she and her 4 siblings lived with their mother at their grandfather's house. Her grandfather, however, was a notorious boss in the adult entertainment industry. In that environment, Fan Mingxiu was spoiled and accustomed to getting whatever she desired. Even though Zhou Jian and Xu Jizhong weren't guilty of committing serious crimes, they had threatened and physically abused Fan Mingxiu. However, given her extreme cruelty and the fact that many others were also victimized by her actions, perhaps this was the greatest price a mother could pay. The haunting guilt of the deaths of her loved ones will stay with her for the rest of her life. It is a reality that cannot be changed. The next case we will discuss is the tragic story of the 3 beautiful sisters. This bizarre incident took place in Nanning, the capital of the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region in China. On February 12, 2009, a gloomy Thursday, a woman living in the Xijiang neighborhood of Nanning went to the police station early in the morning seeking help. Qin Xiaomai told the police that she had lost contact with her 3 younger sisters for over a day. Their phones were all turned off. She had repeatedly knocked and called out for a long time at the room her sisters rented, but there was no response. As a result, Qin Xiaomai suspected that something unfortunate might have happened to her sisters. So she and her husband reached out to the neighborhood security guards and asked them to contact a locksmith to open the door. However, the security staff informed them that, without the landlord present, they were not allowed to call a locksmith at will. This left Qin Xiaomai and her husband feeling both disappointed and worried, so they went to the nearby police station, hoping the officers could help them open the door. After completing the basic registration, the police went to the door of the rental unit where Qin Xiaomai's 3 sisters were staying. According to Qin, the apartment at Unit 703 had 1 living room and 2 bedrooms. Typically, 2 of her sisters, Qin San and Qin Qiaobing, lived there together. The other missing sister, Qin Jianmai, lived in a separate rental unit within the same neighborhood. At this point, the police called a locksmith, and under the supervision of the neighborhood security guard, the apartment door was quickly unlocked. Upon entering Unit 703, Qin Xiaomai immediately noticed her sister's daily belongings neatly arranged in the room. On the desk in the bedroom, the police found some cash and cosmetics. Everything appeared quite normal. However, in the washing machine on the apartment's balcony, the clothes inside seemed odd. They were only halfway washed. Additionally, there was a bag of unwashed clothes on the balcony floor. After being identified by Qin Xiaomai, the police learned that the clothes in the bag belonged to her second sister, Qin Jianmai. This led the police to speculate that Qin Jianmai had brought her clothes over to use her sister's washing machine. Midway through, perhaps due to an urgent matter, they all left the rental home together. However, the suspicious part was that all 3 of their phones were turned off at the same time. According to the eldest sister, Qin Qiaomai, their hometown is located in Xiangzhou County, Lakeshan City, in the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. Their family consists of 4 sisters. More than 5 years ago, the eldest sister, Qin Qiaomai, came to Nanning to earn a living. Eventually, she and her husband opened a fashion store. As their business grew, Qin Qiaomai brought her entire family to live together in Nanning. Under her guidance, the 3 younger sisters of the Qin family began their own fashion businesses. The second sister, 24-year-old Qin Jianmai, helped manage the fashion store with her older sister. The third sister, 22-year-old Qin San, and the youngest, 20-year-old Qin Qiaobing, opened another fashion store in the Xijiang area of Nanning. On the evening of February 10, 2009, the 4 Qin sisters gathered for dinner with their parents. Around 8 p.m. that same day, the eldest sister, Qin Xiaomai, left early as she needed to travel to Guangzhou the next morning to restock inventory. The 3 younger sisters stayed behind to chat with their father for a while before each left their parents' home on their electric scooters. According to prior arrangements, the youngest sister, Qin Qiaobing, was supposed to pick up her father the next morning and take him to a nearby hospital for his arthritis treatment. However, by midday, their father, Qin Shengjun, still hadn't seen his daughter. He repeatedly called all 3 of his daughters over the course of several hours, but every call went straight to voicemail. Realizing something was wrong, the eldest sister, Qin Qiaomai, became worried and rushed back to Nanning from Guangzhou. At the Shijiang neighborhood where the three sisters lived, Qin Xiaomai and others noticed that their electric scooters were still parked beneath the building. Based on this, the local police speculated that if the three Qin sisters had left the neighborhood, they might have walked a considerable distance. However, since the area had no surveillance cameras, it would be difficult for the police to quickly track their movements. According to Qin Xiaomai, her third and fourth sisters often enjoyed going out, so it was possible they had gone to some entertainment venues and hadn't returned yet. Thus, that morning, the local police investigated nearby entertainment spots. However, after reviewing surveillance footage, they still found no trace of the sisters. At this point, the three Qin sisters were officially considered missing and were entered into the police search network. Meanwhile, Mr. Qin's family reached out to the local press and posted missing person notices about the three sisters. But just 3 days later, a shocking discovery sent shockwaves through the city and stunned the Nanning police. On the afternoon of February 16, 2009, in the Liangqing district of Nanning, 2 construction workers were preparing to start their work on a road behind Sunshine New City when they suddenly smelled a foul odor coming from the roadside. Curious, they decided to cover their noses and investigate the woods. They discovered a burlap sack lying in a stream bed on the mountainside, and the stench was coming from the sack. Could it be a dead body or something similar? The 2 workers were very cautious and immediately called the police. About 15 minutes later, several officers from the Nanning City Police Department arrived at the scene. They opened the sack to check and found that it indeed contained a human body. Following the trail of the stench, the police found 8 more sacks scattered near the mountainside. A chilling sense of dread filled everyone present at the scene. The 9 sacks were then taken to the city's forensic lab for examination. After piecing together the remains, the forensic team confirmed that the sacks contained the bodies of 3 different women. The Nanning police compared physical characteristics and finally identified the bodies as those of the Qin sisters, who had been reported missing 6 days earlier. These young, vibrant women had met an unimaginable tragedy, and the killer had murdered all 3 before dismembering their bodies to dispose of them. It's safe to say that this horrific crime was unprecedented in the city of Nanning and was rare even across all of China. Due to the severity of the case, the Guangxi Autonomous Region Police Department immediately classified it as the top priority case of 2009. The Nanning City Police Department quickly formed a special investigation team with the goal of solving the case in the shortest possible time. However, the investigators had no idea that the perpetrator they were up against was incredibly cunning. Beginning the investigation process. After identifying the victims, the Nanning police returned to apartment 703, where the Qin sisters lived, to conduct a thorough investigation. Although the room initially appeared undisturbed, the fact that the Qin family had entered the apartment multiple times and checked the belongings meant that the crime scene had been significantly compromised. The investigation team realized that uncovering clues from this point forward would be a challenging task. Their first priority was determining whether apartment 703 was the primary crime scene. To gather evidence, the police sent in 5 of their most experienced forensic specialists to conduct an on-site investigation. First, they found traces of blood in the bathroom. Then, on a couch in the living room, technicians detected some bloodstains that had been previously wiped clean. Additionally, investigators discovered a dried bloodstain on the heel of a white sneaker. Based on this, the Nanning police speculated that the entire apartment had been meticulously cleaned by the perpetrator. To further investigate hidden traces, the technicians decided to use luminol, a chemical that reveals blood residue, to inspect every corner of the apartment. Finally, they discovered that small traces of blood were still present throughout the rental unit, although most had been cleaned with bleach or disinfectant. Through DNA analysis, the investigative team confirmed that the blood belonged to the 3 Qin sisters. Based on the scattered bloodstains, the investigators made an initial hypothesis that apartment 703 might indeed be the primary crime scene. The police then posed a critical question. If this was the crime scene, how did the killer enter the apartment, and was he or she familiar with the Qin sisters? To unravel these mysteries, the investigation team decided to expand their inquiry around the crime scene. Since the neighborhood lacked security cameras, the police had to knock on doors, questioning residents one by one. However, the investigation revealed no suspicious individuals present in the neighborhood on the day the Chin sisters were murdered. Additionally, neighbors living directly across from and next to apartment 703 reported that they didn't hear any unusual sounds on the night of the crime. If this is the case, the killer acted with extreme precision and cleanliness. According to the forensic report, the time of death for the three sisters was estimated to be between 8 p.m. and midnight on the night of the crime. During this time, the bustling Shijiang neighborhood was not yet in the quiet hours of late night. However, the killer chose this specific time to visit the victim's home and commit the crime, which seems contradictory. Furthermore, the perpetrator managed to attack all three victims at once, and after dealing with their bodies, traveled to another location to dispose of them. The distance from the crime scene to the disposal site was approximately 10 miles. So, how did the killer manage to transport 9 sacks out of a crowded neighborhood without anyone noticing? It seems almost like an unbelievable magic trick. To catch the killer as quickly as possible, the investigation team requested the assistance of thousands of officers from other areas to expand the scope of the investigation. Additionally, they issued a wanted notice with a reward of 100,000 yuan, listing 7 suspicious clues in hopes that the public would cooperate and provide useful information to solve the case. This strategy produced initial results. Within less than a week, the investigation team received hundreds of tips, with more than 3,900 individuals needing to be investigated. The workload was immense. However, at that time, disagreements arose within the investigation team. While they determined that apartment 703 was the crime scene where the 3 Chin sisters were killed, there was debate over whether the killer had dismembered the victims at that location. The police were unable to confirm this. If apartment 703 was both the murder and dismemberment site, it was highly likely that the killer was someone within the social network of the Chin family. However, if the dismemberment did not take place there, it must have occurred nearby, as the killer couldn't have transported the bodies far without being noticed. Although the investigation team lacked direct evidence to confirm whether apartment 703 was the dismemberment site, based on the current clues, it was highly likely that the killer had intimate knowledge of the neighborhood's layout and could have been someone familiar with the 3 victims. Thus, the investigation team decided to start by examining the social network of the 3 Chin sisters and then narrowing it down from there. Within about a week, they had compiled a list of more than 200 people who met the criteria of both being familiar with the area and knowing the victims. Among these individuals, 2 men were identified as primary suspects by the investigation team. One of them was a 29-year-old man named Zhang Xiaoding, originally from Beihai City in Guangxi Province. According to the eldest sister, Qin Qiaomai, Zhang Xiaoding had once been romantically involved with the third sister, Qin San. Additionally, his residence was in another building within the same neighborhood where the crime occurred. More than a year ago, Qin San had moved to the area near Zudo Bridge because of a romantic relationship with a man nicknamed the Cockroach. However, after moving there, she found out that the Cockroach had been married for a long time. This led to a major fallout, during which Qin San confronted him, causing a scene. Due to this complicated conflict, her former lover, the Cockroach, was also considered a suspect. Another suspect was Ren Luofei, Qin San's current boyfriend. According to Qin Qiaomai's recollection, on the evening of the crime, while at their parents' home, she overheard Qin San talking on the phone with Ren Luofei. During the call, it sounded like they were arguing, and Qin San reportedly said, "You must come back tonight, or don't bother coming back at all." However, since this was a private matter, Qin Qiaomai didn't ask any further questions at the time. In addition to these suspicious men, the investigation team identified 3 other suspects, all of whom were neighbors living next to apartment 703. Although these 3 men had the means to commit the crime, there seemed to be no clear motive based on their social connections. When the police monitored their behavior, nothing unusual was detected. Based on their years of investigative experience, the detectives decided to refocus the investigation on Chin San's two boyfriends. At this point, a major breakthrough came from the forensic lab at the provincial police headquarters. In apartment 703, technicians found more than 20 blood samples from different individuals. In one particular sample, forensic scientists detected the DNA of an unidentified man. From this, investigators hypothesized that this unidentified man could potentially be the killer. With this valuable DNA evidence, all the investigators believed they were getting closer to capturing the perpetrator. Meanwhile, another team of technicians began searching for clues on the bags used to conceal the bodies. While most of the bags seemed ordinary, one of them revealed a faint but significant clue. Based on its shape and size, the technicians speculated that it might have been a blanket bag. This led the investigation team in a new direction. Could they trace the manufacturing origin of the bag based on its material and design? They reasoned that tracing the factory's order records could lead them to the specific distribution path of the bag. If lucky, they might even identify suspects who had purchased it. Acting on this, the Nanning police sought assistance from relevant agencies and ultimately located the factory where the blanket bags were produced. According to the factory's order records, the bag in question had been manufactured in August 2004. At that time, the factory had produced a total of 2,000 bags, of which 1,000 were sold directly to Nanning Vocational College. Based on the school's records, the purchasers of those blankets in 2004 were more than 800 first-year students. However, finding those students proved difficult for the Nanning police since they had graduated and left the school by June 2007. As part of their daily routine, many students likely took their blanket bags with them when they left. Thus, the Nanning police began tracking down the contact information of these students after graduation. Eventually, the police discovered that 3 of the former students were living in the Shijiang neighborhood where the crime occurred. One of these former students was a 24-year-old Zhuang ethnic man named Lin Xincheng, originally from Guangxi province, and he was a neighbor of apartment 703. In earlier interviews, Lin Xincheng appeared calm, and when investigators analyzed potential motives for the crime, they did not consider him a primary suspect. However, given the current evidence, Lin Xincheng displayed many favorable conditions to commit the crime. Furthermore, with the significant clue provided by the blanket bag, the investigation team had enough reason to suspect that he was the real killer. Despite this, when confronted by the police, Lin Xincheng insisted that he did not know the 3 Chin sisters and had no involvement in their murders. To verify his alibi, investigators brought Lin Xincheng back to the Nanning Police Department and collected a blood sample from him. Not long after, forensic experts compared his DNA, confirming that Lin Xincheng's DNA perfectly matched the sample found in apartment 703. Following this, the task force quickly moved to search Lin Xincheng's residence in apartment 709. At his home, the police discovered critical evidence that helped unlock the case. In the master bedroom's bathroom, the Nanning police found several traces of human blood. After testing these samples, it was confirmed that the blood belonged to the 3 Chin sisters. Confronted with this overwhelming evidence, Lin Xincheng confessed to all of his crimes. However, a perplexing question remained. Lin Xincheng and the 3 Chin sisters had never met before the crime. So, what was his true motive for committing these murders? To understand this, we must look back 24 years to 1985 when Lin Xincheng was born in Daxin, a city on the southwestern border of Guangxi province, China. Due to his family's relatively affluent financial situation, Lin Xincheng's parents were able to provide him with plenty of material comforts. However, in terms of social and psychological education, Lin Xincheng was severely lacking. Police learned that Lin Xincheng was an only child, and from elementary school to high school, he lived under strict parental control and was burdened with heavy academic pressure. Although Lin Xincheng didn't want to disappoint his parents, after graduating from high school, he only managed to get into a college in Nanning, China. During his time in college, Lin's parents continued to arrange everything related to his education and life to an excessive degree. As a result, after graduating from college, Lin developed a sense of rebellion against his parents' control. At first, he wanted to start his own business in his hometown and open a design company. However, because Lin's parents worked in Nanning, they disagreed, insisting that their son work in the city rather than stay in a small town. Reluctantly, Lin Xincheng had to apply for a job at a cabinet manufacturing company in Nanning, working as a laborer every day. In the eyes of Lin's parents, working and earning money in a big city was a good start. They were proud that their son had obeyed them from childhood through adulthood, accepting all of their arrangements. But what happened next was something Lin's parents could never have anticipated. Growing up, Lin had never had to worry about material comforts. He was not mentally prepared to enter society after graduating from college. In the 3 years following graduation, Lin struggled with social interactions, switching jobs 3 times in a row. These repeated failures caused him to lose faith in his future. Gradually, he became a complacent worker with little ambition. Lin's wealthy parents bought him an apartment in the Shijiang neighborhood of Nanning, hoping he would settle down and start a family soon. However, with their constant pressure, Lin Xincheng began to feel increasingly depressed. According to Lin, while he was in college, he had a girlfriend named Liu Hua. But after introducing her to his parents, they disapproved of her. This caused a shift in Lin's mental state. As a result, he developed feelings for a female colleague at work. Unfortunately, this brief romance ended after just 2 months. Lin Xincheng admitted, "At that time, I felt very lonely." He lived alone in his spacious apartment, repeating the same monotonous and dull routine every day. Lin longed for someone to rely on, but he didn't have any close, trustworthy friends. Eventually, he couldn't bear the isolation anymore and retreated into his room, turning to inappropriate content for distraction. In Lin Xincheng's mind, the lack of physical intimacy over a prolonged period left him feeling restless and uneasy. Sometime later, Lin Xincheng noticed 2 cheerful young women moving into the apartment across from his. One of them, Qin San, was very beautiful and quickly caught his attention. However, having been socially awkward since childhood, Lin only watched from a distance, lacking the courage to approach her. During the Lunar New Year holiday in 2009, Lin returned to his hometown with his parents to celebrate. As you might imagine, it was a nightmare for young people being pressured to get married, and his parents repeatedly asked if he had a girlfriend. Feeling depressed by this, Lin decided to return to Nanning earlier than planned. Back in his apartment in room 709, he once again immersed himself in inappropriate content. The intense scenes from the videos fueled his fantasies. Lin admitted, "I would often hide by the window, secretly watching Qin San's daily activities." He noticed that several unfamiliar men frequently visited Qin San, which caused him great distress. Eventually, after a few days, Lin felt he needed to take action, and those actions were unquestionably dark. As part of his plan, Lin purchased several items, including pepper spray, a long rope, duct tape, a claw hammer shaped like a goat's horn, and a folding knife. At around 8 p.m. on February 10, 2009, Lin saw Qin San and Qin Xiaobing return to apartment 703, and he decided that night would be the time to act. At approximately 8:20 p.m., Lin went to the ground floor hallway of the apartment building, opened the electrical panel, and shut off the power to room 703. After the sudden power outage, Qin San opened the door and went downstairs to check the situation. With the room in darkness, she left the door open to let light from the hallway shine into the apartment. Seizing the opportunity, Lin rushed into apartment 703 and quickly shut the door behind him. In the pitch-black room, using the faint light, Lin took out the pepper spray and sprayed it at Qin Xiaobing, who was sitting on the sofa. When the youngest sister saw Lin charging at her, she screamed and kicked out in an attempt to defend herself. Lin Xincheng responded by stabbing Qin Xiaobing in the leg and threatening her to stay quiet. He then dragged her to the bathroom door, tied her hands and feet with rope, and taped her mouth shut with duct tape. However, at this moment, the third sister, Qin San, had reset the circuit breaker and was about to return to her apartment. Hearing a knock at the door, Lin checked the peephole and saw that Qin San had returned. To avoid raising suspicion, he turned on the TV in the living room and cranked up the volume to its maximum. Then, he quickly opened the door and pulled Qin San inside. She resisted fiercely, so Lin, afraid that she would scream, took out the knife and stabbed her forcefully in the left side of her chest. He then used a rope to tie her up. After securing her, the attacker dragged her into the kitchen. At this point, Lin composed himself and prepared to commit a heinous act against Qin San. At around 9 p.m., there was suddenly another knock on the door of apartment 703. Lin checked the peephole again and saw that it was another woman, shorter in stature. To avoid exposing his crime, Lin kidnapped Qin Jianmai in a similar manner. Tragically, Qin Jianmai had only come over to use her sister's washing machine, but found herself in a horrific situation. After gaining full control of the three Qin sisters, Lin turned off their cell phones, switched off the TV, and dimmed the lights to avoid drawing attention. At approximately 9:45 p.m. that night, Lin entered the bathroom and attempted to brutally assault the youngest sister, Qin Xiaoding. However, she fiercely resisted. Enraged and fearful that his crimes would be uncovered, Lin methodically murdered all three sisters. During the assault, Lin accidentally cut his finger, leaving behind traces of his blood at the crime scene. The investigators were outraged upon learning about Lin Xincheng's brutal actions. However, what followed was even more chilling and deeply disturbing. To cover up the crime, Lin decided to dispose of the bodies. First, he used duct tape to cover the peephole of apartment 702 across the hall, then carefully transported the bodies of the three sisters back to his apartment in room 709. Next, Lin Xincheng returned to apartment 703. To eliminate any traces of the crime, he used detergent to clean all the bloodstains in the apartment. He also took several pairs of shoes and handbags from the room to create the impression that the three Qin sisters had left the house. As a result, on the morning of February 11th, when the Nanning police investigated apartment 703, they found no evidence of anything unusual. Meanwhile, Lin observed the police arriving to investigate the case. He was terrified because the bodies of the three sisters were still hidden in the bathroom of his apartment. After answering the police's questions, Lin returned to work and requested 3 days of sick leave. He then went to a hardware store to buy a steel saw and several plastic bags for packing. Lin completed the dismemberment and packaging in his bathroom, then rode his electric scooter to search for a suitable disposal site. He eventually found a hill behind a neighborhood in Liangqing district about 10 miles away. Since it was a secluded ravine, Lin decided it was the perfect location for disposal. On February 13, 2009, 3 days after the crime, Lin used his electric scooter to transport the remains. He carried out this task during noon and evening hours when fewer people were around, making 2 trips in total. After finishing the disposal and thoroughly cleaning his apartment, Lin believed he had covered all his tracks without anyone knowing. However, he had no idea that the Nanning police would quickly identify him through a distinctive blanket bag. On June 5, 2009, the Nanning City People's Procuratorate officially indicted Lin Xincheng. On June 23, 2009, the Nanning Intermediate People's Court held the first trial. In court, Lin detailed the entire process of his crimes. Meanwhile, the family of the 3 victims remained in deep sorrow. The plaintiff's attorney requested that the court sentence the perpetrator to death and demanded compensation for the family's financial losses, totaling over 1.5 million yuan, equivalent to about $210,000. Despite the charges and accusations, Lin Xincheng remained expressionless, cold, and emotionless throughout the proceedings. Regarding the psychological analysis of Lin Xincheng, the prosecutors argued that the primary reason for his crimes stemmed from years of repression, combined with romantic disappointments, which led him to act recklessly without regard for the consequences. However, Lin's defense attorney disagreed with this viewpoint. He argued that the reason for Lin's severe criminal actions could not be entirely blamed on him. From childhood through college, Lin had shown good behavior. The defense claimed that the underlying cause of Lin's serious crimes was his exposure to harmful societal influences, such as an addiction to watching inappropriate content. The prosecutor immediately refuted this argument, asserting that the root cause of Lin's descent into criminal behavior was his distorted psychological issues, including his obsession with inappropriate content. At this point, the defense attorney seemed to run out of arguments, but he raised the possibility that Lin might have a mental health issue and requested a psychiatric evaluation. The prosecutor quickly countered, saying, "I disagree with the defense's request for a psychiatric evaluation. Based on Lin's own testimony, his actions during the crime were very clear, and after his arrest, all of his psychological behavior appeared normal." The debate grew increasingly intense. The judge then asked Lin Xincheng directly, "Defendant Lin Xincheng, have you ever received psychological treatment before?" Lin replied honestly, "No, I have not." The judge continued, "Does anyone in your family suffer from any mental health conditions?" Again, Lin responded truthfully, "As far as I know, no." After hearing Lin's answers, the judge had his response. Next, regarding the request for civil and criminal compensation totaling over 1.5 million yuan from the victim's family, the judge asked Lin if he had any objections. Lin, once again responding honestly, said, "I have no objections. I am willing to take full responsibility and pay the 1.5 million yuan in civil compensation to the victim's family." According to the law, the court sentenced the defendant, Lin Xincheng, to death. After the verdict was announced, Lin surprisingly requested an appeal. He stated, "I hope for a suspended sentence. I want a second chance at life." On November 6, 2009, the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region Higher People's Court held the appeal hearing. The higher court rejected Lin's appeal and upheld the original verdict. On July 22, 2010, the sentence was carried out on Lin Xincheng. As a father, Qin Shengjun finally saw the murderer brought to justice. However, he still could not believe that he had lost all three of his daughters in a single night. It was truly an unimaginable tragedy that no one should ever have to face.